Father, I thank you, Lord, that you're Father, you're my Father, that you're our Father, that you care about us, and man, are you big. Just thank you for that, that you're big and that you care about us. And so, Lord, in light of those two thoughts, in light of those two truths about you, God, I just ask that you show up today and show us how big you are and show us how much you care about us. Because those two things together should change the way that we approach our relationship with you. It should change the way we approach our relationship with other people. Lord, it should just change us to our very core. And so just show up and give us that. Just pull back the veil and let us see you. I thank you that you honor that. That's what you want to do, and so you're going to do that because you're awesome. In Jesus' name, amen. So I love it when God thinks ahead, which he generally does. I didn't talk to Fritz about the song list. I didn't talk to Rod about coming up and talking to us. And in spite of that, all of that just fits beautifully together with what we're going to be talking about today. You're probably not going to believe me when I say that, but it's true. The last song that we sang, Your Great Name, that could be the title of my sermon. We're going to talk about the name of the Lord today. And so that's an incredibly important thing. The name of the Lord in Hebrew, Yahweh or Jehovah, is actually the most frequently occurring word in the Bible. It occurs, I think, 6,300 times in the Bible. That's a lot, right? And so it's the most frequently occurring word in the Bible. We're going to talk about that, what that means, what we can learn from it, okay? And so we're going to go to Exodus chapter 3. But I want to talk about two sort of concepts, two big, weighty theological terms that I'm going to teach you today. And they are transcendent and immanent. Okay, and I'm going to kind of use the stage here because I know a lot of you are visual, and hopefully my little dance across the stage here will help you. Okay, so over here we have transcendent, and what transcendent means is big, okay? Like bigger than big, like so big that we can't even comprehend it. Like past us, super powerful, just beyond our comprehension. That's what transcendent means. And God is transcendent. He's just beyond us in every possible way, okay? And over here we have immanent. What immanent means is near, close to us, with us, okay? Now those two things seem to be at odds with one another. It seems like you can be transcendent or you can be immanent. Now somehow in Christianity, both of those things are true of God, right? That's good news because you can have an immanent God all day long, but if he's not powerful, that doesn't really matter. And you can have a transcendent God all day long, but if he doesn't care about you, that doesn't really matter, right? Somehow both of those things are true of God. And we tend to err on one side of the spectrum or the other. If we err on the side of transcendent, we think, man, God is really, 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 really big. But he's so big and so far away from me that he doesn't even notice that I exist, right? And so I'm not going to pray because I'm just not going to bother him with my prayers because he doesn't really care about me. Now, we wouldn't necessarily say that, but that's how our prayer life actually works out if we're really far over there on the transcendent side, okay? If we're really far over here on the immanent side, remember a while back, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a t-shirt that says, Jesus is my homeboy. And I'll believe that. Jesus is my homeboy. He's my friend, right? That's over here on the immanent side. But if we're way over here on the immanent side and that's all we focus on, we get to a point where we're like, Jesus is my friend, but he doesn't really have any power. He's just my friend. He's somebody I can talk to, but he can't really do anything for me, right? I'm going to knock this over. So that's the error on that side, right? And we have to bring those two things together and recognize the fact that he is big, bigger than we could possibly imagine. And yet, in spite of the fact that we really can't reach him, right? Anybody in here can reach God on their own? Right? You're lying if you think so, right? Or you just don't know, right? We can't reach him on our own. In spite of that fact, God has reached us. And we can just end there, like altar call, hallelujah, that's great, right? We can just end there, right? Somehow, in spite of the fact that he is far beyond us, he has reached us, right? Hallelujah. Somebody should be happy about that, right? So immanence and transcendence are both true somehow, okay? So we're going to look at a couple of passages where those two ideas are clashing and try to figure out how we can live in that tension, okay? Over the past several weeks, we've had sermons about being unsettled. For me, this is the bedrock for us when we're being unsettled. Both of the circumstances that we're going to look at are two people who are very unsettled in circumstances that are way beyond their control, and they're kind of terrified, and I don't blame them, okay? And just to give you, the end of the sermon already, we're just going to skip ahead so you know where I'm going. We're going to talk about the bedrock of where we can be unsettled, right? The thing that we can stand on in the midst of being unsettled, and that is the character of God. That's who God is, right? We can stand firm in the midst of things going crazy, in the midst of not knowing how things are going to work out, in the midst of God asking you to do something crazy that you don't understand how you can do it. He's going to do it for you, right? I told you I was going to start a college ministry at Radford University. I'm terrified about that, right? That just scares me to my core. But in the midst of it, I have to remind myself that it's not me doing that, it's the Lord doing that through me. He's going to do that, right? And so when we're unsettled, when we're asked to do something that's beyond us, it's a good thing that it's beyond us, because if it wasn't, we would take credit. Right? I mean, I know I would. Maybe I'm the only scumbag in here, me and Sean, right? We're the only ones that are like, yeah, we'd take credit. Everybody else is like, no, right? Maybe it's an Auburn thing. I don't know. So if we could do it, we would take credit, right? But if we can't do it, we have to give credit to him. That's why he asks us to do crazy things that make no sense, right? Just crazy things. I could list off all sorts of things that the Lord's asked me to do that made no sense at all. But he gets glory from it because he worked it out, because he thinks ahead, right? I like it when he thinks ahead. So let's look at Exodus chapter 3. This is Moses, and Moses is going up to the burning bush, and it's just a fun story. So let's look at that first. Moses is out in the desert, to a certain extent, kind of having a pity party, which, I know none of us do. So Moses is, starting in verse 1. And Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord, I want to stop there real quick. You notice up there, or if you notice in your Bible, Lord is in all caps, okay? Now when you're in the Old Testament, if you see Lord and it's just normal, right? Just L-O-R-D, nothing special about it, then that's Adonai. That's the Hebrew word for Lord, right? Big shocker there. Okay. If you see it in all caps, or if it's in different font, or something about it is different to make it kind of stand out, that is the translation in the English Bibles for Yahweh or Jehovah, the personal name of God. Okay. Personal name of God. Sounds an awful lot like imminent, right? Personal name of God. Okay. And so the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. I have no idea why he has that internal monologue. That just seems weird to me. No one else is around. Moses sees a bush burning and it's not being consumed, and he says to himself, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why this bush is not Who does that? Like maybe, wow, that's neat, but not I will turn aside and see this thing. That's just so weird. And so when the Lord saw, again, all caps there, when the Lord saw that he had turned aside, God called him out of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Another little interesting note about Hebrew that's not necessarily relevant to the sermon, but I think it's funny. Here I am is one word in Hebrew, it's hene. And hene in Hebrew there's a hard time translating it. It's basically like an attention getter. And so hene sort of means in English, I guess, look at me. Kind of like, just pay attention to me, right? And so when you look in the prophets and it says, who will I send? Behold, Lord, send me. It's hene, send me. Like, look at me, send me, right? Trying to get your attention, right? And so that's kind of what Moses is doing here. God says, Moses, Moses. And Moses is like, yeah, right over here. Kind of what he says. I just think that's funny. And God says to him, do not come near, take the sandals off of your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Now, if you know me very much, you know that I'm going to be going into all sorts of Hebrew stuff and background and all that kind of stuff, because I like that, okay? Holy ground to us sounds like ground that is holy, okay? Defining the word with the words themselves, right? That's really great practice. But holy ground just sounds like ground that is holy. But the difference in their context, in their society, is they have this notion that there's all these gods out there, right? There's really, really big gods, which sounds like transcendent, right? Really, really, really big gods that don't necessarily care about you or even know that you exist. And perhaps if they know you exist, they're going to squash you, right? Just big, giant gods over here. You worship them in a temple, okay? That's how that works. But you have also these local deities, which sounds a whole lot more like imminent, right? You have these local deities that you worship in a holy place. And they only have a sphere of authority in a particular location or a particular thing, right? They're a god of this mountain or a god of mountains in general, perhaps. But there are areas where they have no power at all. They're only gods of particular things, right? And you worship them in that one particular location. Okay, and so Yahweh, in this situation, is telling Moses, that's the kind of place you're at, right? You're in a holy place, okay? And so Moses thinks holy place, local deity, limited power or authority. You see how that would work? God is saying this is the type of place, right? Sometimes I cry when I hear my voice too. I don't blame you at all. It's kind of terrible sometimes. So, but he's saying holy place, he's thinking that means local deity, which means limited power or limited authority, right? That's what Moses is thinking. This makes more sense of the passage. It's good when we can make more sense of the passage, right? Because Moses, have you ever been out in the desert and a burning bush starts talking to you and then you said, no, I'm not going to listen to you? Like, who would ever do that, right? But Moses goes on to say, I don't really want to do what you want me to do. Like, who does that? Like, you have a burning bush in front of you that's like, you should do this. No, I don't think so. That just doesn't make any sense at all, right? But based on the fact that he's understanding it to be a holy place, a local deity who has limited power or authority, he's saying, oh, you want me to go somewhere else where your power and authority doesn't reach? I think that's a bad idea, right? That's kind of Moses' approach to this. And so Moses' response to him after God gives him this long thing, I've seen the affliction of the people who are in Egypt and yada, yada, yada. By the way, yada, yada, yada is Hebrew for he knows, he knows, he knows. There's another freebie for you. I think that's funny whenever somebody says yada, yada, yada. He knows, he knows, he knows. Anyways. And so when we get to verse 12, it says, and he said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you've brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. This is really encouraging for Moses, right? God is saying, I'll give you a sign to prove that I'm going to do this. It's that I'll have done it. And Moses is like, that doesn't help, man. Like, your proof to me that you're going to do this is that it will be done already. Like, that just doesn't work, man. I need something else, right? So then Moses goes on to say, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Now, Moses is packing a lot into this because he's not just saying, well, do I call you Jeff or William or SpongeBob? What do I call you? I don't understand. Like, what's your name? That's not what he's saying, okay? He's saying, if you're a local deity and you have a limited sphere of authority and power, I need to know what that sphere of authority and power is. So you need to define that for me. If I'm going to go talk to Pharaoh on your behalf and you happen to be the God of mountains, guess where that conversation with Pharaoh is going to take place? On a mountain, right? Because that's your sphere of authority. If you're the God of thunder, I'm going to wait until there's a rainstorm before I talk to Pharaoh because that's your sphere of authority, right? Moses is asking God to define himself. And so how does God respond? In verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. Okay, let's break this down real quick. Moses says, what's your sphere of authority? And God says, yes. And Moses is like, that doesn't help me, right? Like, I'm not tracking with you, But that's essentially what he's saying. I am what I am. It's interesting in Hebrew, the difference between tenses. In English, we have past, present, and future. It was happening, it is happening, it will happen, right? Pardon me for bringing grammar into church. I know that's of Satan, right? I'm sorry, I apologize. In Hebrew, there's no such difference, really. You have completed action, and then you have incomplete action. And so completed action is in the past because it's complete, right? But incomplete action is present and future. And there's no difference in Hebrew between present and future, really. And so in the context, you determine whether the person's talking about a future event or a present event. And so here, when God says, I am what I am, or I am who I am, it's really, I am who I am, and I will be who I will be. I mean, those are kind of the same thing in Hebrew. And so, Moses is asking, God, please pin yourself down and tell me what your authority is. And God's like, everything, right? I'm just going to be. Is that cool? And Moses is like, you're going to be what? And God's like, I am. what? Like, you see the difficulty there? That's how God is choosing to define himself, okay? And so then God goes on to say this to the people of Israel. This is the last half of 14. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, again in all caps in your Bible, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever. Thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Are we a part of forever and all generations? Okay, so that means it's a good idea for us to understand this name, right? Proverbs 18:10 says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous will run into it and be safe. Right? So knowing what the name of the Lord is, understanding the name of the Lord is a good thing for us, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the day here. Rest of the sermon. Sorry, I'm not going to keep you late. I might, depending on how you behave. I don't know. So what's happening here with Moses, you have to understand, Moses is being raised by Pharaoh, the Egyptians, right? He's schooled from their perspective. And so he's trying to think through this whole deity thing and trying to understand who God is and why God wants him to do these things. And God's response to him is, I will be. Well, the interesting thing about Yahweh, he goes on to say, the Lord, right? The Lord in all caps, that's Yahweh. The Lord, this is my name for all generations. This is my memorial name forever. The Lord, Yahweh, that word in Hebrew means he will be, or he is. Okay, so does that make sense to you a little bit? If God says about himself, I am, I will be, then when people talk about God, they say, he is, he will be, right? Does that make sense? So for the rest of Israel's history, when they're talking about God, they say, he is, he will be. It makes a little bit more sense of God's names in the Old Testament when you have like Jehovah Jireh, God my provider, right? Well, Jehovah means he will be. And so God's name, Jehovah Jireh, literally just means he will be my provider, right? Jehovah Rapha, Lord my healer, right? Really just means he will be my healer. And the reason the Jews did this is because they kept trying to tack on things to he will be so they could remember, well, here's something that we've seen him do. Here's something that we've seen him do. Here's something that, because to remember, right? In Psalms it says, forget what chapter, it says, those who know your name will put their trust in you, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out in his name, what does he do? What will he be, right? And they end up finding out that he will be anything. Right? Not that he's a genie that you can just make God into whatever you want him to be, but he will be whatever you need, right? And that's what he's trying to express to Moses. He's trying to relieve that anxiety of Moses, who is being asked to do something insane, and he's trying to relieve that anxiety. Notice he's trying to balance those two poles, though, right? Because when he shows up in a holy place and actually gives his personal name, that sounds imminent, right? But his personal name says that he has an unlimited sphere of power and authority. And that sounds transcendent, right? And so God is marrying these two concepts in this situation with Moses to try to tell him, I am personal, I am for you, I am with you, but I'm a whole bunch of other things too, right? That's not just where I end, because I don't end, right? Does that make sense? That's the conversation between Moses and Yahweh. So do we understand what Yahweh means? Do we understand I will be what I will be, I am who I am? So we're going to move on to another passage in the New Testament. But before I move on, I want to make sure we're all with me, okay? All right, so let's look at Matthew 14. Matthew 14, we're going to start in verse 22, okay? For those of you who are burning with curiosity, I'm reading from the ESV. I know there are lots of you who are burning with curiosity to know what version I'm reading from. Matthew 14, starting in verse 22, Jesus has just fed the 5,000, and so he's shown a little bit of power, right? He's kind of a big deal, right? Jesus walks on the water, and in verse 22 it says, immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds, right? Like, guys, go ahead, I got to take care of these people. They're all over me being crazy, and I got to get rid of them, right? And after he dismissed the crowds, this is verse 23, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. Now let's pause for just a moment. The disciples are fishermen who regularly spend time in a boat. They regularly spend time in this boat. They regularly spend time in this boat on this body of water. And so if anyone is capable of managing this boat in this body of water, it is these people, okay? So this storm is bad enough that it has exhausted their professional competency, okay? This is beyond their ability to deal with it, and they are the people who would be able to deal with it. Does this make sense? Well beyond their ability to do, okay? And then in the midst of that type of storm, if you can hold in your mind how bad that storm must be, Jesus walks on the water, okay? Now, I want you to think about that. The disciples are about to die in a boat on this water, and Jesus is walking on this water, right? Not stumbling, not, getting knocked around by the waves. He's just strolling, like, oh, there's a big tsunami, that's pretty cool. Just gonna stroll around a bit, right? He's not running to them like, guys, I gotta get to you really quick. No, he's just, I got this, it's cool, I got this, right? Not threatened in the least, right? That sounds a little transcendent, right? Big, huge, powerful, right? So notice what Jesus says. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, it is a ghost, and cried out in fear. I think we can all relate there. If you're in that kind of a storm and you see something walking on the water, it's clearly not a person, right? That just doesn't make any sense. And so they're a little terrified. But immediately Jesus spoke to them saying, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Now, I want to pause again here. I don't want to say anything bad about your translations. I'm not trying to tell you that you can't read the Bible unless you read Greek and Hebrew or anything like that. Translations are fantastic, but translations aren't perfect. And so there are times where translation doesn't get it exactly how it looks in the Greek and Hebrew. Because it's just, if you know another language, it's sort of impossible to get a perfect translation all the time. There are some words in other languages that just don't exist in this language. And so there's no way to perfectly translate, right? Can I get an amen from anybody that speaks Spanish or anything else, right? Like, thank you. I wasn't going to call you out, but I appreciate it. I wasn't going to be like, Rod, give me a witness, But I mean, that's just how translation works. Like, it's just impossible to do that, okay? So I'm not trying to say anything bad about your translation, but there are times where there's a nuance there that's a little different. Here's one of those nuances. When Jesus says, it is I, the phrase that he uses there points directly to the passage we just looked at, okay? And so the passage we just looked at in Exodus 3:14, where God says, I am that I am, Jesus uses that phrase here, walking on the water, okay? So transcendent Jesus, who is capable of walking on the craziest water in the universe, is now personally disclosing himself to the disciples, imminent, right? Personally disclosing himself and saying, guys, don't be afraid, I'm Yahweh, right? I'm that guy from Exodus 3. Remember him? That's me, right? Don't be afraid, okay? Now, the interesting thing is the word that gets translated for Yahweh in the New Testament is Lord, right? The word that gets used in the Old Testament for Yahweh, when it gets used in the New Testament, gets translated as Lord. So Peter's response, look at Peter's response to this. Jesus says, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Peter says, and Peter answered to him, Lord, if it is you. So this conversation originally really looked like this. Jesus walking on the water, in the craziest of all water, just everybody's terrified, right? They're about to die. Let's just throw the oars overboard and just ride till the death, right? Like we're not going to be able to do anything about this. It's over, right? Let's just give up. That's how bad the water is. And Jesus is walking on that, right? And he comes up and he's like, guys, don't be afraid. I'm Yahweh. Peter's response is, Yahweh, if it's you. Right? He recognizes Jesus' voice. He's lived with Jesus for a while now. He knows who Jesus is. At this point, he recognizes Jesus. He's really saying, Jesus, if you're Yahweh, then you can tell me to come on the water, and I'll be able to walk on the water. Right? Now, this is one of those points of theology that kind of messes with you because we're like, oh, you're not supposed to test God. God, if. You should never talk to God that way. Peter's like, no, if. Prove it, right? Prove it. And what did we talk about a little bit ago? Truth does not need to be afraid of questions, right? Jesus is not threatened by this. Jesus hears Peter saying, if you're Yahweh, I can come on the water. And Jesus is like, I'm totally Yahweh. Let's do this. Come on. Come on. Totally. Let's do it. And then Peter gets out of the water, or gets out of the boat, starts walking on the water, and he's like, he totally is Yahweh. Like, look at this. This is crazy, right? And then just like any other human being, he's walking on water, because we've all done that before, right? And then he starts sinking, right? He's terrified, right? That makes sense, right? You lose sight of the fact that he's Yahweh. And so then he starts sinking, but then he catches himself a little bit, and he's like, Lord, again, Yahweh, right? Yahweh, please save me. And Jesus is like, I told you I was Yahweh, man. Come on, let's do this. Come on, right? Not a big deal, right? So this, when to back up and to get personal about it, right? Not just looking at the text. When you see Lord, whether in the Old Testament or the New Testament, you need to read Yahweh, and really, you need to think he is or he will be, right? Now sometimes that doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's just the name, right? It doesn't necessarily mean he will be, right? But a lot of times when you read that, you need to recognize that's what it's saying, because that's who God has personally defined himself to be. That make sense? When you sing songs that have your great name, thank you for the song selection. Like I said, we didn't coordinate, I promise. When you sing songs like Your Great Name or anything that has Lord in it, anything that has Yahweh or Jehovah or any of that stuff, right? You need to recognize that that's what we're talking about. Those are the words that we're using. That's what they mean. That's important. That should change the way that you pray. Because you're praying to a transcendent God who has no limit to his power or authority, right? And that transcendent God is immanent with you. Those two individual statements aren't that exciting, but if we put them together, that's pretty good news, right? That's pretty exciting. That should change the way you pray, change the way you sing. Now, I know Fritz and Rod and anybody else that leads worship is like, man, we got to change all the words now. That's not the case, okay? So I want to explain something, okay? When you sing Jesus, let's think about where Jesus comes from, okay? Jesus, this is how we got Jesus, okay? Jesus comes from the Latin, which is Jesus. Looks exactly like Jesus. You just change the J and turn it into an I, because Latin didn't have J's. I'm sure everybody knew that. They're like, come on, man. I knew that already. Okay? Iesus, right? Iesus. Iesus came from Iesus in Greek. Okay? Iesus came from Yeshua in Hebrew, which is a shortened form of Yehoshua. I'm sure everybody's like, dude, I knew that already. Come on. Or what's the point? That's really what you're actually thinking. You're like, you're just showing off now. Come on. Yehoshua in Hebrew is a name that means Yahweh is salvation. Now, what does Yahweh mean? He is or he will be. So what does Yehoshua mean? He will be salvation. So what does Jesus mean? He will be salvation. So when you're singing Jesus, name above all names, you're singing Yahweh. You just don't know it. Okay? He will be salvation. All right? Does that make sense? Yes, sort of, a little bit. So this ought to change the way that we relate to one another. This ought to change the way that we relate to God. It should change the way we worship, change the way we pray. What you need to understand is that whatever God is asking you to do, he is asking you to do it imminent, right? He's relating to you. Praise God for that, right? He's asking you to do something. But the one asking you to do it is transcendent, capable of making that thing happen, right? And so when the Lord unsettles you, to go back to the sermons that we've been talking about for the past several weeks, when the Lord unsettles you and asks you to do something crazy, like start a college ministry, and you're like, that's a really bad idea, right? Like, I just don't know that I could do that. He's saying, look, you do this, I will be with you. Same way that he was saying to Moses, right? You go to Pharaoh, I know that terrifies you, I will be with you, right? When he's asking you to do something insane, he will be with you. He's the one that's going to make it happen. To share a personal example, my wife and I, while we've been listening to these sermons, we've really been convicted. We'd always talked about adoption, but it was always kind of like, yeah, we might adopt one day. Just kind of like one day. because one day is so ethereal and vague that it never really comes, right? One day, I'll exercise one day, right? One day's never going to be here, right? Clearly. So, you can say that, right? But, through these sermons, it really started to convict me. I'm clearly not a fan of abortion. I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but I'm pro-life. And it occurred to me one day, the early church was actually, this will make sense in a second. Just follow me, okay? The early church was actually accused regularly of eating babies. This is why. Because abortion existed then. But abortion that existed then wasn't the type of abortion that we have now. Abortion that existed then was something called exposing babies. And what exposing babies meant was you would have your baby, and if you didn't want them, you'd leave them outside. The baby, from their perspective in the ancient world in the first century, wasn't really alive until the family accepted it. And so the baby would be born, and the family would decide, we don't really want this, they'd put it outside. And guess what the church did? Every time that they saw that, they'd pick up the baby and take it in. And so the early church saw that and said, God is for orphans. God is for the poor. God is for the people who can't do anything for themselves. And so we're going to take them. And the society was so messed up that they said, if someone is picking up an exposed infant, they're clearly not taking it to raise it, because no one would do that. And so the society assumed these depraved individuals must be eating the babies. That's how bad their society was. You can complain about our society all you want. We aren't that bad yet, right? But their assumption was that this life is worth so little that if anybody is picking it up, it's because they want to eat it. Okay? So it occurs to me in these sermons that if I'm going to be ardently pro-life, that I can't just be pro-life when it comes to abortion. I have to be pro-life when it comes to foster care and adoption and everything else. Because if you convince someone to not abort their child, what happens to that child? They didn't want it. They're not going to raise it. They're going to put it in foster care. What's going to happen to the child? I put this to you. We ought to learn from the early church. We ought to learn from the early church and say, you don't want that child. The body of Christ wants that child. We'll take them. What sort of witness would it be to the world if we emptied foster care, orphanages, every unwanted child had a family? Then when people say, yeah, you're just pro-life, it should be a woman's choice. They're like, no, we back it up. We're pro-life to the end. We'll take anybody, right? What sort of witness would that be to the world? It's easy to say I'm pro-life and debate it, right? It's not that easy to actually say, I'm going to open my family. And so my wife and I have been praying, we just had our first child, and that's just been blowing my mind, and it's crazy, and I'm tired. So, hallelujah. But in the midst of this, we've been thinking, I don't know how many more biological children we're going to have, because there's an awful lot of children out there that need parents. And we love kids, and why don't we just start taking some of them, Now, I'm not necessarily saying God's calling you to adopt. I want to say that. But that's not my place, right? I'm not the voice of the Lord, in spite of the fact that I do have a deep, booming voice. The Lord has said, right? That's not necessarily the case, right? But he might call you to do something like that you wouldn't have normally considered. And you need to understand, like the case with my wife and I, if he's calling us to do that, it's not through our strength that we're going to do that. Amen. Who cares about that baby more than us? Yeah. He will be, right? He's the one that's going to give us the strength to do that. Right? So Fritz and the band, if you guys would like to come up, what I want to do for the next few minutes is just give you an opportunity to respond to the fact that you know who God is. That God is the transcendent, all-powerful, crazy, huge, bigger than you could possibly imagine God, but that God actually loves you and cares for you and wants to be with you and wants the best for you and actually wants to have a relationship with you and a relationship with everybody that you know. I want to give you a chance to respond to that. So they're going to play Your Great Name and I think a few other songs because they're amazing. And I just want you to have a chance to think in worship about what it means that you are in a relationship with He will be. You are in a relationship with that transcendent God who is immanent. And whatever you're doing in your life, whatever's going through your life, He wants to be a part of that. He wants to help you in the midst of those crazy things that don't make sense, that you're not sure how they're going to work out, right? So I don't know what that looks like for you. I don't know what your life looks like. But I know that Yahweh wants to be a part of it. I know He will be wants to be a part of it. And He will be a part of it if you'll let Him.